All right, welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks Boxscore Geeks show. I am your host, preemptively said that, Andres Alvarez. You can find me on Twitter as Nerd Numbers. This show is produced by our amazing producer, Brian Foster. You can find him on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. My co-host, Patrick Minton, is out this week. He is looking at caterers. That said, we got a ton to discuss. Let's just get into it. We're going to be talking the Rockets. They have a new coach. We're going to be talking the 76ers. They're still bad. We're going to be talking Steph Curry. He's still good. And we're going to be talking the East and the West. Are they even? All right, Brian, let's dive in. The Rockets, they fired Kevin McHale. Sorry to put you on the spot. How do you feel about this, Brian? I'm going to throw it to you first.
No, I didn't have time to look into it. So I do agree with what you're saying in the pre-show, though, for the most part, which is, their problems are probably bigger than McHale. Coaching doesn't have as big an influence as people give it credit for. So it seems like Dwight Howard's probably still hurt. Harden, who knows what he's doing. The teammates aren't happy. So it's hard to see if this will make a difference. But it is kind of exciting. J.B. Bickerstaff took over for him. Bernie Bickerstaff's son, of course. I think he coached your Nuggets maybe for a long time. So it's good to see like a young coach, coming into the league like that.
Well, what I'll say to your point, because you just said you didn't know if he was a good or bad coach. What our findings basically show is if you're talking about player development, most coaches don't seem to matter. And what that means is if you look at how a player kind of progresses through their career, we don't notice that many coaches statistically significantly seem to impact all of the players they coach across the league, except for a select few. Phil Jackson back in the day, and Greg Popovich. And then, of course, as we pointed out, that gets even harder because it's hard to know if was Phil Jackson impacting the team because Tex Winter was on the bench or because he gave them books behind the scene, because he didn't call a lot of timeouts. It's a really hard thing to pin down. The other thing that Arturo has looked into a lot is coaches can impact who gets played. That's kind of an obvious thing. And we do seem to notice that some coaches seem to be better or worse at putting in the right players. And of course, that's a way they can impact it. Now, I've got a little to say on that in regards to Kevin McHale, because the reason Kevin McHale got fired is legitimately, I believe this is the case. If you go to Basketball Reference and look at the simple rating system, which factors in margin of victory, how much the team wins on average by, and strength of schedule, who they've played, I believe the Rockets are bottom 5 in the league right now. And that's, it's worth noting, right? They were, one game away from the Western Conference Finals last year, I believe. So that's bad. And the reason they're kind of bad this season, there are two players that you really have to kind of fault. And that's Ty Lawson, which pains me because he was amazing on the Nuggets. He's one of my favorite players, but he is playing horribly this season. I mean, it's a weird thing because, we know he had, I think, alcohol and or drug abuse problems last season. And, who knows what's going on this season, but, clearly the change of scenery, whatever, he's not playing well, or he's not gelling with Harden or whatever. And then Corey Brewer is just this player that's never been good. His entire, he was on the Nuggets for ages and got to take 10, 15 shots a game, and it was never worth it. And he's just never been good. And when the Rockets kind of picked him up, I didn't think it was a good play then, and I still don't. And then one of the players we've talked at length was last season they let go, was it Tariq Black? They let go some rookie that was pretty good, some rookie big man that was pretty good. They let him go to pick up Josh Smith, and then Josh Smith was terrible. If you look at his line against the Los Angeles Clippers, I tweeted this out today when someone was arguing back and forth. I said he shot them out of the playoffs, and he said, well, he shot them into the Western Conference Finals. And I kind of looked over the numbers and basically said, I looked over the numbers and basically went, hey, he didn't shoot well. See, he had a few good shooting games, but if you look at the series on whole, the playoffs on whole, he did not shoot well. And, it's like you can't really give a player credit for winning game 6, quote unquote, if they cost you game 4 and game 5, and you shouldn't have gone to game 6. So the Rockets are currently the 5th worst team in the league. They're worse than the Lakers. So where's that? But anyway, like I said, last season, some of their struggles in the playoffs were basically Josh Smith, Jason Terry, and Corey Brewer. This season, their struggles really boil down to Ty Lawson and Corey Brewer. And so it's really odd for kind of the coach to get the blame here, from my perspective, when in reality, it's really the front office didn't put a good kind of core around that group. They have, if you have James Harden and Dwight Howard, you have a great start, right? You just have to get decent players around them, and I'd argue they really haven't. I would defend Ty Lawson was a great pickup. I loved that pickup. It looked great. Anybody that kind of talks, hey, I didn't think chemistry or blah 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 or whatever, fine. He was still a good player. They picked up a productive player at an affordable contract. I liked it. But on the whole, I would really argue this team is kind of, I'll put in quotes, underperforming in large part because of construction. Like Jason Terry is ancient and hasn't been good in a couple of years. Corey Brewer's always been awful. I tweeted this out today where I'm kind of really shocked at the West, at the number of teams that kind of just luck into 2 or 3 star players, the Thunder, the Clippers, the Rockets, and then don't really do anything with it, right? The Thunder, for instance, have the second highest payroll in the league right now. And well, yes, I think Durant and Westbrook and, he's been a little off, but Ibaka are absolutely worth the money. I'm not happy with the rest of that team, really. Clippers, a lot of that team, Austin Rivers is getting rotation. What the heck? And then the same is, of course, true for the Rockets. What is Corey Brewer doing getting minutes? So I kind of feel bad for Kevin McHale because I feel this is a front office that hired a bunch of people. And we were kind of talking this pre-show. It's hard to know how much control even the coach has over playing players if the owner or GM is behind those players. If the owner says, we picked up Ty Lawson, we expect Ty Lawson to make us a star, you need to figure out Ty Lawson in your rotations. If he's not looking good in practice, you may not have the option of benching him. You may say, hey, I think we should bench him or bring him in slowly. And the GM or owner might say, don't you dare do that. He's a key part. And, coaches, I think a real problem with trying to analyze their performance is coaches' decisions are not made for winning, which is kind of a weird thing to say. Football's a great example of this. There's been research for decades for all the talk about the advanced stats revolution in basketball or baseball or sports. We've had data for decades now on like going for it on 4th down or going for 2 or whatever, right? And teams still don't do it. And it's because the coach doesn't want to get fired. And so if McHale goes, Lawson's not looking so good, but if I don't play him, I might get fired, they're in trouble. So, or rather, if he doesn't play Lawson and they don't win, he's going to get fired. So if he plays Lawson, he doesn't play well, maybe he's got a defense. Clearly that didn't work out. So it's hard to know how much to blame on McHale here, but it's also worth saying, you can only play with the pieces you're given. I always get upset when I hear people say injuries happen to every team or that's not an excuse or, not every team can have LeBron. It's true. Like the players you have impact how many games you can win. And the Rockets, I've said this a lot of times, they're better than most and they certainly have a better squad than most, at least usually. But at the same time, in this case, I don't think they've done enough with that core. I don't think they've added to that team enough, and that's kind of a shame.
Yeah, for sure. I will push back a little bit though because they have some guys. It. Well, so we've got the Rockets team roster up here right now at their box score stats, and I mean they've got a lot of guys that are underperforming right now that you'd expect to be doing better. Dwight Howard is playing well after a slow start, but not what you'd expect from him, not a superstar. Same with James Harden. He's been an average player. Again, complaints about his playing style maybe, or rumors are coming up. And then, of course, the guy you were talking about, Ty Lawson, well below his average. And then, who else could they be playing instead of him? Pat Beverly, who's also a good player normally. Well, he's been even worse than Lawson. So a lot of guys underperforming, and I believe their defense hasn't been good either. So, yeah, it's tough to say, again, if this is going to last all year, these guys will probably improve and, go back to the mean, I'd say. And
yeah.
Kevin McHale probably did get a little bit of a raw deal, even if he makes some bad decisions.
Yeah, Harden's not playing well. And I mean, here's what's rough. Another article idea I've had in the back of my head is basically called watching fractions. So the issue kind of comes down to the fact that it's really hard to analyze good players in the NBA because sometimes what you would have to be monitoring is fractions, making half a 3-point more per game. And I know that sounds weird. It should sound weird, right? Because half a 3-point more per game is really one more 3-pointer every 2 games. So how would you couldn't monitor that game to game, right? And so even like this, so I'm looking at James Harden, and James Harden takes 11.7 3-pointers a game, and he is horrible, right? He's connecting on 26.2%. But what that really means is, right, he's making like 2.5 per game, something like that, maybe 3 per game. Well, if he makes one more 3-pointer per game, 2 more 3-pointers per game, uh, and I'm talking per 48, so per game it's probably something like 10. But if he makes 1 or 2 more 3-pointers a game, he's a completely different player this season. And is that just a cold streak, or is that, something, systemically wrong? It's really hard to tell after 12 games. And so that's the issue, is that it can be really, really tough to monitor the games and see players being stars versus not stars. And, a bad stretch, like in Harden's case, right? A bad stretch of games from three can keep him from being a star player, which we're used to him being. So I don't know. I mean, I think something you kind of said when we talked in relation to the trade for Mario Chalmers from the Heat was that if the team goes on a run after a fact, it's going to get credit. I think there are some players performing below. I think Dwight Howard's about what we expect, by the way. If you factor in his age
That's true. He's
and his
not as young
injury
as he used to
history,
be.
I think his numbers right now are what we can expect him to be. But James Harden, half as good with, he was like a runner-up MVP candidate to Steph Curry last season, and he's playing below average right now. Ty Lawson has traditionally been one of the top 10 point guards in the league, and he's currently playing, he is costing his team points every time he's out there. So I think there should probably be some regression to the mean. So the new coach will probably get some credit for it. I just don't know how much you can blame small sample size and a bad bench on Kevin McHale.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got Harden's stats up right now. He's at 26.2 3-point percentage, well below his average. He's been up near 40 most of his career. And although I hate to troll you a little bit, but he has also a career high in 3-point field goals attempted. So usage curve types would push back against you. But as we well know, it's probably small sample size, not usage.
We might, if we want to talk usage, we'll get into that when we talk Steph Curry at the end of the
Good.
show. But yeah, I definitely want to talk some usage curve. Okay, so that's all I have to say. The Rockets are kind of in the dumpster right now. The good news is, while their performance is really bad, if we're looking at their wins produced per every player, their points over par per game, their strength of schedule, adjusted margin of victory, they're bad. The good news is they're only a couple games below 500. So if they turn it around, they're not dead. Whereas a team like, this is the next thing I want to talk, I mean, the 76ers probably have no shot in the playoffs. So the 76ers, do they have like one victory, or what is their record at the moment?
Dre, I'm pretty sure they're still winless. Well, let's see. As of yesterday, I'm not sure about today. They were 0-11 last I checked. We can bring that up.
All right. So yeah, let me know if they got a win while I wasn't paying attention. They did not get one tonight, by the way. I think Paul George like beat their starters on his own, if you're talking points, which, that's never a good thing. But regardless, the 76ers, I actually pinged Dave Barry last week, because Dave Barry a while ago wrote this article that said he had a bold strategy, which basically went, you give your GM 3 years to make the playoffs. And if they go 3 years without making the playoffs, you fire him. Now, I would be willing to make some concessions to that. I ended up, it was just too rambling. I'm going to have to do a rewrite on it. But a post I've been teasing on this show for a while is descriptive stats versus predictive stats. And still haven't gotten it out to what I want. But I think predictions are really hard. And so if you have a team and you say, hey, I think this team can win a title this season, right? You have to quantify it. You have to say, you know what? If Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Horace Grant come back healthy, there's nothing to keep us from winning a title. And then if Michael Jordan retires to go play baseball, you go, we're probably still going to be a good team, but I got to take that guarantee back, right? I think that's true of every team. It's, true of the Cavaliers. If LeBron James goes down with a 6-month injury tomorrow, that greatly changes how you're going to predict the future. So I think if you've got a 3-year plan for a team, it is well within your rights to try and quantify your beliefs for making the playoffs, right? You can, and I think, to Dave's credit, I think making the playoffs in 3 years for a GM is a reasonable request, because don't forget, they let in 16 teams into the playoffs. You don't even have to be top half, right? So I think that's fine. Now, you can quantify it and say these things went wrong. The problem with the 76ers is the plan they followed doesn't really deviate from the norm. The plan they basically followed is stockpile a lot of draft picks, get a lot of young players, and try and rebuild that way. And we've seen that, I'll put this in quotes, work with the Oklahoma City Thunder. But that basically is hitting every single draft 4 seasons in a row. And traditionally, Dave Barry wrote the article on this, if we look at top 3 picks, it's less than a coin flip to whether or not that top 3 pick is going to be a productive player. I can rattle off LeBron James, Dwight Howard, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Garnett for high schoolers that were top draft picks that did really well. And then I can come back and rattle off, Kwame Brown and Darius Miles. I believe it's Darius Miles. Anyway,
yeah.
For underperforming, or I can rattle off, Andrea Bargnani for number 1 picks that underperformed. I can, for a Blake Griffin who was injured and then came back to be a star, I can rattle off Greg Oden who was injured and never the same. It's not rookies are not guarantees. They start out unproductive. Even some of the best players, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, started out in the NBA unproductive. It took them a season or 2 to kind of get their footing, and then even another couple of seasons to hit the MVP levels we're used to. Even some of the greatest players like Chris Paul and Anthony Davis, who started out great, they're on bad teams, so it doesn't matter. So you can't really count on your rookies being great. That's just something we've known from the get-go. And there's lots of other stuff that can go wrong. So yeah, you can try and argue, well, Embiid's been injured multiple times, and you go, lots of rookies get injured, right? I can start just rattling off Anthony Davis, Blake Griffin, Greg Oden. I can rattle off top draft picks that have had injury concerns just in the last couple of drafts. You rattle off rookies that are kind of underperforming. Nerlens Noel, we had high hopes for, and he was playing great last season, is started off the season poorly. Jahlil Okafor, we loved how he looks, hasn't been playing well. It's not that hard. Like I said, you can rattle off players. Andrea Bargnani, I'm trying to think, are there Andrew Morrison, right?
Adam Morrison.
I'm not thinking of recent. Apologize. Adam Morrison. Did I say Andrew? Yeah. Adam Morrison. Even in recent drafts, I'm sure it's not that hard to just look over top picks and go, these players underperformed. So I would argue the 76ers can't really claim they expected X and have gotten unlucky, because we're used to seeing this kind of stuff in the draft. And then they actually have something killer against them right now. And I tweeted out about this today, Brian. If you go to the 76ers tab, the 76ers' 2 best players right now. Can you tell me who they are?
Oh, yeah. I have this up actually already. Let's see. Well, I did have it up. Yeah, here we go. I've got it. We've got TJ McConnell at the top, Christian Wood second, and Phil Pressey third. I wonder if he's
okay. And that's going by per 48. And if we go by total wins, it's TJ McConnell and Hollis Thompson. So here is a trivia question for you. When was can you tell me what draft pick was used on?
Do I get drink tokens if I get it right? No, sorry.
I will give you drink tokens if you get them all right. So can you tell me what draft pick TJ McConnell was picked with?
Actually, I think you hinted earlier that he was undrafted. Is that right?
He was
you gave me the answer
undrafted
already, so no drink tokens.
So that's one. And what about Hollis Thompson? You know he was drafted?
I also want to say undrafted. I remember seeing him in the D League a few years ago.
Also undrafted. Phil Pressey, do you know he was drafted?
I don't, but let's just say undrafted.
That 3 for 3. I owe you a drink next time I'm in the Bay Area. So anyway, but that's the funny point to me is, this team isn't good. Let's just get that out of the way. And I have McConnell, by the way. I've been wicked impressed with how he's been playing. Just a joy to watch. But when we break it down, the best players on this team aren't the players that required the high draft picks. And, they haven't been spending the money. And in the NBA, I can buy missing on star players, right? And Dallas is playing better than I expected. I give the Dallas Mavericks all the credit in the world. They put all their eggs in the DeAndre Jordan basket. And if that had gone through, it would be such a different story. And obviously, and then they went with Wes Matthews and he had an Achilles problem. So it's like, you can't fault the Mavericks if we're talking plans that the GM sold me versus what happened.
And they're still a pretty good team despite that.
Well, I think people have alluded to this, and I'm really curious, is Dirk Nowitzki is off to such a hot start. And I don't know if with age, if he's just going to start dropping off. So who knows? But yeah, I mean, they're playing pretty well. And the coach could also look me in the eye and say, hey, look, you gave me the bankroll. You told me to go after DeAndre Jordan. We had him handshake. We had our guys sitting in his house. And he dropped at the last second. We got Wes Matthews, was looked great, and then he had an Achilles problem. It's like, and I look at that. I look at that GM and go, you know what? You're right. I'm not gonna. I'll tack on a year to your 3-year playoff deal because that's bad luck. But the 76ers, if he says, we're going to pick up 5 draft picks in the first round, I can go, in the best case scenario, 2 of those, in the average scenario, average scenario, 2 of those guys are above average players in about 3 seasons. How is that going to get me to the playoffs? And it's not. So, and in the NBA, I just can't buy that there aren't players that you can target if you have cap space. Now, you have to like go the, I'll put in quotes, Moneyball route and go after kind of undervalued players or underrated players. At one point, Kenneth Faried was on the block, and I'm happy he didn't go to the Knicks. I'll put it that way. I'm kind of, if he ends up on like
is he a New York native? Is that right? He would have been going home. That could be wrong.
I have no idea, but if he goes to like the Spurs or some other team, I'll pat him on the back and be like, "Good job. I hope you win a title." I'd have been sad if he went to the Knicks for obvious reasons, but he was on the block for like a subpar. I think it was Iman Shumpert and a draft pick. So I got to buy that the 76ers could have come up and said, we got a couple draft picks, we got a young player, and could have got him. So it's like you've got to, if you want to win, you can't go for the lottery basket, because there are 2 teams that come up for this model: the San Antonio Spurs and the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I calculated this for fun, by the way. The San Antonio Spurs, the odds of them getting both Tim Duncan and David Robinson, given their odds in both of those drafts, was 3%. So when 97% of the universe is out there, the Spurs, don't have all the titles they got because, really the key behind them winning their title in the start of this was getting those 2 players. And then the secondary key that everybody seems to forget was them drafting insanely well outside of the lottery. Right. Kawhi was he 14th?
14th or 15th, something like that.
If he was 15th, he doesn't count, but he's like the closest thing they've had to a lottery pick in terms of key players on their team in forever.
Ginobili, Parker, they were all like late first, early second.
Manu Ginobili was the last player in the draft. Tony Parker was the last player in the first round. A player like Danny Green they picked up from the Cavs discard pile. The Spurs basically haven't needed the draft in years, and the draft that kind of sparked this, entire great team was luck. And the Oklahoma City Thunder, as I pointed out, they were in horrible position to even get a top 2 pick. Even after getting the top 2 pick, the team that was in front of them had an analyst that was pushing really hard to go after Durant. So Durant has been the key behind the Oklahoma City Thunder's success. And by the way, Westbrook, to his credit, last season and this season, holy cow! I think I was looking at this earlier, but I think there's a triple-double watch out tonight for Westbrook. He's sitting right now. I mean, I don't know why they're up by 3. It's the 4th, but he is currently sitting at 31 points, 8 assists, and 6 rebounds. So it'll be tough for him to get that triple double. But if there's anybody who's going to be able to pull down like 4 rebounds in 10 minutes of gameplay,
Ibaka is the one guy we can give him credit for, though, right? He wasn't chalked. They found him a little farther down.
But even then, like that's the other point. People point to picking well with high draft picks as the key to success. And the 2 teams they try and use to justify this are the Spurs and the Thunder. And I'm saying the Spurs, 3% chance, throw that out.
Oh, and on top of that, even guys like Duncan and Robinson, obviously the number 1 overall picks, it's still, 55, 60% chance at best they'd turn into stars. So they had to get lucky even more than that 3% on them.
Oh, yeah.
Same with Durant.
Yeah, and I'm like in Durant. I mean, he played horribly his first season, yes. But I mean, and like the problem with Ibaka is he wasn't a lottery pick. There are so many teams that have key parts of their success. The Bulls had Dennis Rodman, and Scottie Pippen. They traded for the draft pick, so he was a top 5 pick, but they didn't own him. So there are so many teams that do this, and so basically, when I pinged Dave Barry, I said I have to concede to him the 3-year thing because, barring a miracle, the 76ers are going to miss the playoffs, and I don't think the idea of firing the management that's been behind this plan is wrong, because I think it was a nice long shot. And I think there is definitely some good to the stockpiling draft picks and trying really hard to find stars that way. But where they failed is getting other good players. And in the NBA, that's unforgivable. You should be able to pick up 1 or 2 decent players a season through trade, through free agency, through whatever. Yes, it's excusable to miss on stars. It is inexcusable to miss on even just picking up average players.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going back and forth on this 3-year thing because, yeah, you can get unlucky and, guys can get hurt. But at the same time, you're right. I mean, there's always going to be the Ed Davises and the Brandon Wrights that just keep bouncing around, but just keep playing really, really well wherever they go, no matter how good and bad the teams are. And if Patrick are here, remind me exactly what he likes to say is that is it that you shouldn't intentionally try to lose, but you shouldn't necessarily be trying to win either. So it's the intentionally trying to lose part that's wrong. Like they can keep stockpiling all these draft picks. That's great, but there's so many cheap veterans they could bring in and just start winning games and becoming so much closer to being a playoff team without jeopardizing their stockpile of talent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I'll give to this is just basically the idea that yes, I mean, I give him all the credit in the world for letting go of bad contracts, players like Spencer Hawes, and I forget they got in trouble for him because I guess there was an injury issue with them. I feel really bad that I'm feeling really bad that I'm dropping his name. I think he went to the Pelicans. Apologies, I'll try to include it in the links. No promises of that either.
Oh, you're talking Drew Holiday.
I think it was Drew Holiday.
Yeah, so that was great, right? Because he was kind of an overrated player with a big contract, and they got the pick that became Nerlens Noel, which who knows if he's going to be good or bad, but that was a great trade for the 76ers.
Yeah, it's you let go, the idea, and there's a book called like The Extra 2%, which is about baseball. And what they talk about in that book is, I think it's called triaging. And this idea is you want to underpay for good assets and you want to sell assets for, basically you sell your assets for more than they're worth and you buy assets for less than they're worth. I mean, that's seems dumb, but that's really simple, the simple logic you want to go for there. And the issue we run into when it comes to the 76ers is they've done a great job of buying draft picks for less than they're worth and getting rid of players for bad players. They have not bought any players, and that's the last key part. And there isn't really any NBA team that's gotten around that, because even if you look at, say, the Spurs at having picked up Tim Duncan in the draft, David Robinson was not on his rookie contract when that happened. They needed to re-sign David Robinson. And yes, you have a lot of advantage if you draft the right player and getting their restricted free agency rights, but you still have to sign them. And so that's the key, is that if you're not signing any decent players that are veterans, you're not going to win. That's just the case. And like I said, the Thunder are like the one kind of example against it. And even them, I'm like, that's luck. And I mean, on the one hand, yes, hoping for luck is fine, but it's not a plan.
Yeah, and as far as I'm concerned, man, the Thunder just choosing Kendrick Perkins over James Harden, despite Harden's woes this year, that was just that's it. That's the end for that. Getting respect from that ownership group.
Well, yeah,
it's what I'm trying to say.
It's funny that you really do need to consider salary cap management and drafting and all this as kind of a chess game. You have to say, hey, look, when are the players we would really like to sign in free agency going to be free agents? When do we have a shot at them? What's my cap space look like then? You've got to say, okay, what do we like this draft? What's the draft situation then? You've got to be able to say, who are players we want and what's their salary? Do we have the ability to match it? You really do have to put yourself in a position where your roster is in a spot where you can make the moves you want to make. And signing Kendrick Perkins to that deal, when I would argue they had no need to, when all you have to do, someone in the front office should just say, hey, look, we got Durant, Westbrook, and Ibaka coming up for re-signing in 2 seasons. And we're going to need, $40 to $60 million in cap space to do that. We really need to make sure we have the flexibility to do that. And, that's the point is, Kendrick Perkins, you could have done something with him. You could have given him an option or whatever. But doing what they did, which was just signing him to a guaranteed long deal outright when he hadn't even shown he was back, was just foolish.
Well, and even if they thought he was good, because again, we have hindsight here. Maybe Perkins would have returned to his young player form after getting through the injuries. Turned out he didn't. But there's no way you pick that over James Harden, who's just playing out of his mind that season. He was so good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, here's what's worth considering when you're targeting players. Looking at their ceiling is huge. And now, to be fair, this is one of those things that's really hard to predict, but it gets easier and easier the older players get. By the time Kendrick Perkins had made it to the Oklahoma City Thunder, it was pretty obvious that his ceiling was a not star, but very good center. And that's fine. That is a good thing for any team to have. But the ceiling of Westbrook, who's we're seeing his ceiling right now, and holy cow, triple-double machine. We're seeing Kevin Durant's ceiling, which is the greatest scorer in NBA history until Steph Curry took it away like 2 seasons. Kind of rude on Steph Curry's part. I'll let that transition us to our next topic, by the way. But, it's kind of rude on Steph Curry's part to kind of just not even let Durant kind of rest on that for that long. We've seen Ibaka be, the 4-block, 12 rebound a game guy. So it's like all of these players had huge ceilings. James Harden with his efficiency had a huge ceiling. You don't go for the player with a lower ceiling that's older to long and guaranteed. Anyway. So that's all I got there. We'll definitely. I told Dave when their magic number or whatever is 0, I'll write a concession post to him. So, and I know I've promised like 10 posts on these shows now the last couple of weeks. I love the NBA season being back. Have I mentioned that, Brian? All right, let's talk an article I actually did put up. So, like I said, I think Kevin Durant is one of the greatest scorers in NBA history. And it would be easy to call him the greatest contemporary NBA scorer based on his performance during his MVP season's runs. Like he was a top MVP candidate for a few years and shot lights out. And unfortunately, as I already spoiled it in the last segment, I can't because freaking Steph Curry just came along and has, last season included and the start of this season, shattered my mind as to what a scorer is. And it is amazing. It is, as a stats fan, this is a joy to watch. So, Brian, I put up a poll this week because I looked this up. And I don't know if he can sustain this, but I really, really hope he can. I put up a poll and asked the interwebs, can Steph Curry finish this season taking over half of his shots from 3? And I want to stress, the only player in NBA history to shoot over 15 shots a game with over half of them from 3 is George McCloud. It's happened once in the history of the NBA, with the three-point line being in existence, of course. Steph Curry currently is shooting over 20 shots a game, over half of them from 3. I don't even know what to say about that.
Yeah, and he's so fun to watch. Okay, so I'll get some eye test stuff going. I apologize for that, but he's just got all these moves to get three-pointers off. He's got the sidestep that he does. They always do the high pick and roll screens, up at the 3-point line, and that's something teams didn't used to do as much. He can just get the shot. Like you said, he's the cheat code, right? The amount of time it takes him to release the ball. So, yeah, I mean, he's a unique player we've never seen before. Maybe he can do it.
And I mean, I put, so by the way, he's going to pass this. I forget the last game he played. Let me see I don't believe they're playing tonight. So I think they played last night.
No, they're not. They're playing tomorrow night.
Oh yeah. How am I forgetting this, Brian? How did that make you feel? So as of this recording, last night, the Golden State Warriors played the Toronto Raptors and it was a nail biter. It was a nail biter, but they pulled it out. And I joked and said, are you worried? Because it's like the first game they've had that isn't a blowout.
It was just a weird game. It was really ugly. The main thing that kept the Warriors close to the Raptors was there's just a ton of fouls. Like, they fouled the Raptors so many times. And, of course, it was DeRozan and Lowry who shot, 10 for 13 each at the free throw line or something like that. So that's really what kept them in it. And they did get slightly out-rebounded as well, which is kind of my one concern with the Warriors. I'm the big, small lineup hater. They'll go centerless at times and get out rebounded.
Well, centerless is usually Draymond Green, and Draymond Green is traditionally very good. I consider Draymond Green a center. I mean, I'm sorry, he's got the arms of a center, the weight of a center, the rebounding ability of a center. I mean, I have no problem rolling out Draymond Green as your center.
I get scared, though, because here's the thing. Like, if you just think about these lineups, a little of a tangent. We'll go back to Curry and his greatness soon, but so he's a guy that's like 6'5", playing power forward, right? Yes, he has really long arms. But for a small forward, he's an amazing rebounder. For a power forward, he's kind of average. He's around 10 or 11 per 48. And then for a center, he's a below average rebounder. But that's not the real problem. The problem is they're going to have someone like Harrison Barnes or Andre Iguodala even at power forward who just does not rebound like a power forward. So it's a cascading effect, right? If the other team decides to keep their center in, there's a situation so the Warriors can get out rebounded. Now, the reason why it usually works out, though, is the other teams get scared of the small lineup and they play along with it, right? So if they're putting their small guys in too, then yeah, the Warriors smalls will definitely out rebound them.
Well, I mean, it's also if you think they can get other stuff. So this came up in the article I posted because I went off, this is the year I'm against usage.
Back to Curry.
And so when I talked to Curry, I talked the usage curve, and I basically said, for those of you that don't know, and this is a myth, I want this stressed. This is not, there is the only science, I'll put that in quotes, that has ever been behind this is Dean Oliver saying he's made these usage charts that took years and years, and he's never shown his work for it. And they're in basketball on paper, but he doesn't show his work for how he gets it, and basically says scientists wouldn't be happy with how, like no one would be happy with how he came up with it. He actually says that in Basketball on Paper. I might quote that at some point. So anyway, the usage curve idea is as a player takes more shots, we expect their efficiency to go down because the number of open shots, good shots, et cetera, that they have opportunity to get basically goes down. And there is a little bit of truth to this. And let's stress this. So one example is it is pretty obvious that even bad defensive teams can at least stop some shots at the rim, right? You can't take every single shot. You would love to take every single shot as a layup. Even bad teams are going to be able to prevent you from getting every shot as a layup. That's fine. And part of the reason for that is just the rules, right? The defense gets to set before you get there. You are limited to how long you're allowed to stand in the paint on both offense and defense, but on offense, you're limited, as to how long you can stand in the lane. So you can't just try and like post up and back up for too long, or you'll get called for a 3-second violation. Basically, the rules are in place such that defense has some edge on being able to guard the rim. And as such, even the worst teams are able to guard the rim. And as a result, you can't just get every shot close to the rim. So when you talk about players like DeAndre Jordan or Andre Drummond or whatever, who really only shoot well from up close, you can go, yeah, there's probably a limit to how many shots we can get them. Then there's like Shaq, right, who can take tons of shots. And, it's, you just throw them and throw them and throw them and accept the bad free throws. But there's a little something to that. I'm still not sure I'm convinced of it. But you cannot sell me on the usage curve for three-point shooting, because as long as you are able to get the shot, you should be able to take it. And on a team like the Warriors, where you can't double teaming Steph Curry is not a viable option if you're playing against the Warriors, because they've got Harrison Barnes and Klay Thompson and Andre Iguodala and Draymond Green are shooting well from three this season. You've got other three-point shooters. You've got players like Andrew Bogut and Festus Ezeli and Draymond Green who can score inside. So it's like the idea that you can't just find an open three for Steph every couple of plays doesn't work with me. And really that's kind of the key. Someone asked about that, about like other players like Kyle Korver. And I think there is a reality to teams not efficiently allocating the types of shots they want to go for. Because I do agree, you'd love to go for a layup every single game. And basically you should be able to go, if I can't get the layup, I want to go for a three. And you should be able to swing the ball. I mean, if you watch a game, right, the good teams swing the ball a couple of times. And Steph Curry's a player where, if you're not on him like a glove and he's got a look, he can do damage. He's shooting 45% from three. And I mean, this is an eye test thing, Brian, because he just shows up on Vines and whatever frequently. How often are we seeing Steph Curry, shooting 4 or 5 feet back from behind the three? Oh, yeah. It doesn't seem right. Like, I think the 3-point shot destroys the idea. I think if there was no 3-point shot, there might be some truth to the usage curve. With the 3-point shot, it stops being true, because normally, I mean, this is true of Steph Curry, right? Steph Curry is shooting 45% from behind the three. Well, Steph Curry is going to shoot closer to 50% from closer, right? So as he gets further away, yeah, it's harder and harder to make that shot. But if you give me a 50% boost, this isn't hard math. If you give me a 50% boost on the value of my shot, I'm allowed to be much worse with my shot. So if I'm shooting 50% from two, I am allowed to shoot 33% from three to get the same value per shot. So as a result, the 3-point line kind of destroys that to me. And then to some people who are asking on the usage curve, yes, that is, shooting efficiency is one of the most variable things we see. And so I think the usage curve, if we're going to pretend it's real, which it really isn't, is highly dependent on the types of shots you can get and how well you can take those shots. And that entirely depends on the player. Players like Shaquille O'Neal and Michael Jordan were able to take 20-plus shots a game and be very efficient. And it's worth noting, Michael Jordan, for most of his career, was not a good 3-point shooter. Most of his shots were drives and layups. So there are players like Michael Jordan who can get lots of layups every game. Same with Shaq. There are players like Steph Curry and James Harden, when he was playing well, that can get lots of threes. You can't just make a general trend. It's based on other stuff. And when we look at just the overall thing, I mean, my general opinion is you go for the best shots you can get every play. And if you do that, amazing things are going to happen. See the Warriors for an example.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the Warriors do. So teams do try to double team Curry all the time, every game. Well, not every game, but you know what I mean. It happens quite a bit. But they always have an answer. They usually pass to the roll man and the high post, guys like Green and Bogut that are great passers. They find someone wide open for three, like Harrison Barnes in the corner, or lob at the rim to another big guy. So yeah, I mean it's like pick your poison with the Warriors, and so keep firing away at those 3-pointers. You know, it's like Antoine Walker said, there's no 4-point line, so may as well take a lot of threes.
I like it. But yeah, I had to talk that. That was kind of ridiculous. I'm just doing a time check real quick.
But here, last thing on the usage curve, though, like just think about this logically. Even if you think there is a usage curve, which we don't, you got to push the limits, right? You got to find out where it is. So with Kyle Korver, who knows? Maybe if he were to shoot like 15 or 20 threes a game, his percentage would go down. But why not try? You know, why not push it farther? Curry did it, and it's working out. He's taking more threes and shooting better. Same with Drummond, right? Drummond was a first and second year player. We kept complaining. He's one of the best centers in the league already, but they're not giving him minutes just because he's a young player. Maybe he's not ready for more minutes yet, but let's find out. Let's give him more.
And he's a player where I could agree with the usage curve, where I could say, hey, look, we're not going to. At the point, you can come up to me and make the argument. This is where our player is good at shooting from. Fine. And then going, hey, just, we're not going to be able to get Drummond 20 shots a game from there, right? Okay, well, let's just plan on getting these many shots. Okay, now how many threes are we going to need to take? That's the kind of thinking you should have. You should basically, for your offense plan, going, we're going to aim for these types of shots and how to get them. You shouldn't go for the logic, hey, don't just shoot more. And I agree. Like with Steph Curry, it's like, give him the green light to shoot away. Why not? All right.
Absolutely.
All right, there is one last topic to discuss. We're not going to go too long on it, but Mark Cuban, he's been a fantastic heel this season. He went off and said that, and by the way, another thing that we didn't bring up, Mark Cuban actually did bash the 76ers. He says they don't know what they're doing. But he came up and said that the East is currently better than the West. Now, obviously, with the Warriors and the Spurs playing like they are, that's a little biting, I would say. But I was shocked because you can go to Basketball Reference, take a look at the strength of schedule adjusted margin of victory. And currently, 9 of the top 15 teams in the NBA are from the East, 6 are from the West. So the West is more top heavy than the East, but the East has a little remarkable.
Little delay there, Dre. Start that sentence over.
Okay, I said Mark Cuban said the East is better than the West. It's not really true if we're talking the top, because the 2 best teams in the league by far, I believe, let me just verify this real quick, are the Golden State Warriors and the Spurs are head and shoulders above everybody else. But of the top 15 teams, 9 of them are currently Eastern teams, and this includes the Celtics, the Heat, the Cavaliers, the Raptors, the Hornets, the Pacers, the Bulls, the Pistons, and the Hawks. So that was a little remarkable to see. And I don't know if I buy it holding on, because it's worth noting the Clippers are in the bottom half right now. The Rockets are in the bottom half right now. I do think with injury and stuff, the Pelicans are going to stay in the bottom half. Remains to be seen if the Memphis Grizzlies can turn around and come back. But, a lot of the good teams in the NBA
in the
right
Lakers,
now.
Dre? Oh, sorry.
It's a big one. But it'll be interesting to see some of these teams in the East. We have been in love with the Raptors lately, with how they've been playing. And I said my dream finals this season is the Warriors versus the Raptors. The Celtics, some of the young players they picked up, like Jared Stollinger, is playing really, really well. I love Isaiah Thomas. The Miami Heat, what is there to say about Whiteside that hasn't been said on the show? Cavaliers, obvious. It'll be interesting to see if the East can kind of stay competitive as the season goes on. Paul George is back. Maybe the Pacers are for real. The Bulls have Jimmy Butler. The Pistons have Andre Drummond. What do you think?
I mean, heck, the Knicks even have Porzingis, and everyone is on board his bandwagon. So we probably don't like him as much as other teams. We love his defense, but his offense isn't quite as good. But, yeah, I mean, the East has a lot of exciting players. It's true. Even Arturo's Celtics, like you pointed out earlier, the best team in the East right now, according to point margin.
Now, and the last thing to stress, we're going to have to say this at least for another 5, 6 weeks. Small sample size. It's
Yeah.
early in the
Yep.
season. And that is really the key about the wall I'm going to keep banging about descriptive stats is we can tell you what happened, and that will have some impact on what we think will happen, but it does not explain everything. So just because we say, what's his name for the New York Knicks, the best player on them right now?
Oh yeah, Langston Galloway, who's rebounding like crazy and shooting 60% three
Yeah.
or something like that.
Even if we say Langston Galloway is a top 5 player in the NBA right now, which we believe, that does not mean I think for a second he's going to finish the season top 5 in the NBA. Just because the Dallas Mavericks currently have a winning record and Dirk Nowitzki is playing well does not mean I think they're going to finish the season that way. But that's the fun of sports is we are watching with you as it's going on, and this is the stuff that excites us. And so, like I said, right now the East has an argument to being better than the West. You have to it takes creative counting, but it's a fun one.
And I also want to point out part of your initial statement here, portraying Cuban as a heel. Absolutely. What a great heel. He's got his TV show and everything. Good media figure, Mark Cuban.
Well, I mean, he's said some stuff that, I like him. I think he's an intelligent guy, but some stuff just clearly seems antagonistic in nature. At one point he said the Clippers are the Clippers. It doesn't matter what you change. And I kind of went, wait,
right.
What? I'm like, they changed the owner. They've changed the location since they started, right? Because I think they were originally San Diego.
Right.
They've changed the players. They have some of the best players in the league. They, in theory, although I don't agree with this, I think Doc Rivers is horrible and his nepotism for Austin Rivers is, I can't. The West is so strong and the Golden State Warriors are so good. Teams like the Clippers kind of can turn into Charles Barkley's Suns or the Utah, not quite as good as the Utah Jazz, but if you look at the landscape of the '90s, there were some damn good teams. Clyde Drexler's Portland Trail Blazers.
They never won a title during that stretch, did they? Even though they made the playoffs so many years.
Clyde, who? Clyde Drexler?
Yeah, when Clyde Drexler was on Portland and they had all those
They made it to 2 out of 3 finals.
Yeah, but
it was ridiculous. They never won a finals. But yeah, they did really well. The Utah Jazz, I can't say that Doc Rivers is going to cost the Clippers a title because the Warriors are just that damn good right now. But I can say that his nepotism for Austin Rivers is going to cost his team something at some point, and it's going to be hilarious to watch. But in theory, the Clippers have done they've changed the coach to a good coach in theory. They've changed the management. They've changed the players. They've changed the owner. They're a much different team, right? They've got to be the most popular team in Los Angeles right now with how the Lakers have played the last 3 seasons. So, Mark, keep making that statement. You just kind of look at that. It's like that makes you.
Look how bad he trolled you, though, Dre. He trolled you so bad.
He did. It was brilliant. It was a brilliant troll too. So I love it. I think, with all of the benefits we give to owners, I would at least like them to be entertaining. So I like that Mark Cuban is. All right. I think we're either over or we've hit 45 minutes. So I think I'm cool taking us into shoutouts. And I do have 2.
Yeah, we started a little bit late.
So do you have any this week, Brian?
Nah, I'll just skip them. You can take them all.
All right, so this is getting old hat at this point, but we love ESPN 30 for 30. I don't know what the loss of Grantland, what it's going to mean for ESPN, but I actually watched the U and the U Part 2 last night. Love them. So much fun, and I will argue it is funny that if you listen to the language and talking about college sports, it is I didn't take notes, but at one point they used the line like. We wanted to run as professional organization as possible. And I said, all right, so you wanted to run a really professional amateur organization. Makes sense. So anyway, but it was a ton of fun to watch. And, the U Part 2, the spoiler is, yeah, the U arguably has some really shady practices going on. This is Miami. Miami arguably has some really, really shady practices going on to violate NCAA guidelines. And then NCAA, well, they're trying to investigate, does a bunch of shady stuff. So basically, you're just kind of stuck shaking your heads and going, we can't tell what, it's very Orwellian, right? You can't tell which one is the pig and which one is the human. So that was that. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed. There was I'll make sure to include the link, but Dave Barry gave an interview this week. I always love these. He talked the Baltimore Orioles in baseball, which makes sense when basketball's in full swing, but it was a lot of fun, so I'll give a link to that. So those are my 2 shout outs. That's been our show. If you found us not through the site, you can find us at boxscoregeeks.com. You can also find our show on iTunes and Stitcher, The Boxscore Geeks Show. We are live every week. It looks like Tuesday or Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You'll have to follow myself, Nerd Numbers, Brian Foster, who is Boxscore Brian, or Patrick Minton, NBA Geek on Twitter, if you want to get the official scoop as to when we are going live. And if you missed the live show, you can catch us on YouTube at channel Nerd Numbers. Can't wait to see what happens in the NBA. Oh, and one last thing to shout out. If you see any good box scores this week that you'd like to highlight, every Monday I am doing a piece on the top 10 box scores of the week. These don't just have to be good box scores. They can be bad box scores. They can be interesting box scores. They can be what the heck just happened box scores. Anyway, regardless, if you tweet those to me at hashtag BSG top 10, could end up in the article I put up every Monday. So want to shout that out. And with that, we'll see you next week.